Hi, thank you for clicking on this video. In today's video, I am going to talk about how to convert or write terminating decimals. Here's an example of a terminating decimal into fractions. Let's get cracking. In order for a number to be considered rational, it must be possible to write that number as a fraction. In grade 10, you are expected to write or convert decimal numbers into fractions and vice versa. Example number 1. Okay, in this slide, I am going to explain the first step that you need to take, right? Or that first step that you need to understand so that you can convert or write this decimal number as a fraction. Okay, so two things to understand. This is a whole number before a decimal point. A decimal point can be referred to as a comma. So this is a number before a decimal point, and this is a number after a decimal point. Okay, now you need to leave a whole number before a decimal point. This is the first step. You leave any whole number. So in this case, a whole number that we have is 0, right? You leave it in front of a fraction. Remember, we are trying to write this into a fraction. Okay, now I'm going to expand and go ahead and write 0. That is our whole number that I'm going to leave in front of a fraction. So numerator, we have a numerator and a denominator. So this is our fraction. What do? You leave any whole number that you see here. So any whole number before the decimal point. So hence why I have 0. That 0, I have it here in front of a fraction. Okay, keep this in mind. Let's go to the second slide. Right, from the previous slide, we managed to establish that we have a 0. We had a 0 in front of a fraction. Okay, now in this slide, we need to write the number after the decimal point as the numerator of the fraction, right? So this is the number after a decimal point. So this number must be our numerator, right? So I'm going to go ahead and write 2 as our numerator. Okay, now we don't know yet what our denominator is. All right, so let's move to the next slide. On the previous slide, we managed to establish two things, right? That we have a 0 in front of our fraction, and we managed to get our numerator as 2. Okay, so we don't know what our denominator is. Okay, so on this slide, we need to count the number of places after the decimal point. How many decimal places do we have after a comma or a decimal point? We only have 1, right? So I'm going to write, say, decimal places. We only have 1. Okay, after a comma. So if I had 2 numbers after a comma or a decimal point, I would have two decimal places here. Okay, keep the whole thing in mind. Let's go to the next slide. From the previous slide, let's recall we have 0 in front of a fraction and our numerator is 2. Okay. Now, what else do we know? We know that our decimal places we had only 1. Okay, so we only had 1 decimal place because of that. Okay, now we want to know what our denominator will be. All right, so our denominator can only be in this format, right? So what is common? 1 is common in each format. Okay, so it can either be a 10, 100, 1,000, etc., just like that. All right, so the first thing that you need to take note of is that 1 is common, right? 1 is common. Now, then what you need to determine is what is 0, how many zeros you need to put here, right? The number of zeros must be equal to the number of places after the decimal point. And 1 decimal point, meaning the number of zeros will only be 1, right? Decimal places is 1, I will only put 1 0. If I had 2 decimal places, I would write 2 zeros here. Okay, look, I'm going to go ahead and put only 1 0. Okay, so this simplified is now 1 over 5. Okay, this is now our fraction. Okay, this is our fraction. Now I need to explain something before we move to the next example, right? What this 0 means to that fraction. Okay, let's use a different pen. So we have 0, we have 2 over 10. Okay, now the main function of that 0, or the other way to write this fraction, is as follows. So you have 0 plus, right? In between here there is plus sign, right? And you can write this fraction as is. So it's 2 over 1 over 10. Okay, let's go ahead. So this is 0 plus 2 over 10 simplified or written as a decimal, right? That would be 0, 2. Okay, if you punch that into your calculator. Now add these two, 0 plus 0, 2. What do you get? You only get 0, 2. Okay, the conclusion would be, as you can see, we have a 0, right, plus whatever that we have here as a fraction, right? So anything plus 0, right, is that thing, right? So meaning 0 does not make any difference. So we can leave it out and not add 0 to our fraction, right? Write 1.425 as a fraction. What do we need to do? The first part is to write that whole number in front of a fraction. Let's do that. So we only have 1 in front of our fraction. Numerator, denominator. Okay, so that 1, I put it here as in front of a fraction. Okay, keep this in mind. Let's move to the next slide. Okay, from the previous slide, we know that we have 1, and on this slide we need to determine the number of the numerator for our fraction. Okay, now write the number after the decimal point, right? Write the number after the decimal point as the numerator of the fraction. So these are the numbers after the decimal point. So I'm going to write these numbers as they are, right? Which will be 425, right? And they are now my numerator. I don't know yet what the denominator is. Okay. Okay. Now let's move to the third step. Remember, what do I have from the previous step? I have 1 and I have my numerator as 425. Okay. So now I need to count the decimal places. Okay. How many decimal places do I have? I have 1, 2, 3. Okay. So I have 3 decimal places. Only 3 decimal places. Okay. I have 3 decimal places. Okay. So this is my denominator. All right. So I have 3 decimal places. I need to keep this in mind and move to the next slide. Remember from the previous slide, what did we have? We know that we have 1 in front of the fraction. We have 425 as a numerator, right? And then how many decimal places do we have? The decimal places that we have is 3. Okay. Now, remember, the decimal places determine how many zeros you have here on the denominator. Okay. So since when I have 3 decimal places, I will have how many? 3 zeros. Okay. So the last part would be just to simplify. Okay. So this simplified will be, I'll have 1. So this simplified, if you put this into a calculator, what you get, I think you'll get 17, 1, 7 all over 40. All right. Now, this will be your answer. Okay. So 1 in front of a decimal point. All right. Now, let's explain what we did explain on the previous example. So 1, this one, okay, plus, remember there's a plus here, plus 425 over 425 over 1000. I'll have 1 plus, so this whole thing, right, will be 0, 425. What is the answer? So the answer is 1, 425. Now, you see, this goes back to what you have here. Okay, so this 1.425, same as 1.425. Okay, so that means this is correct. Please make sure that you subscribe, and I'll see you on my next video. Thank you for watching. Bye.